The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the brakes off of Carolina, controlling what they can control. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live post-game reaction episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, no ads or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. My biggest takeaway and game balls are coming up in a little bit, but let's start off with the biggest moment. But I don't really have a biggest moment. This was a tough game to pick, a biggest moment in. The Bucs didn't punt the ball until their final possession of the first half with under a minute to play, and that was their only punt of the game. They had 6 first-half possessions, scored 2 touchdowns, 3 field goals. They had 3 second-half possessions, scoring 2 more touchdowns and kneeling out the game. You mix in a special teams touchdown, and it was complete dominance by the Buccaneers all day long. The defense was a little shaky to open up the game. They allowed the Panthers to go 70 yards in 6 plays, matching exactly what Tampa's offense did on their opening drive. But then they get 3 straight 3-and-outs before allowing a 40-yard Adam Thielen touchdown on Carolina's 5th possession. Then they give up some yards, but Pinheiro misses a 53-yard field goal at the end of the half. In the second half, Carolina had the following drives: 5 plays, 12 yards, punt. 3 plays, no yards, punt blocked and returned for a touchdown. Then 5 plays, 9 yards, punt. 11 plays, 22 yards, turnover on downs. That's 43 total yards allowed in the entire second half by the Buccaneers defense, who was without Jamel Dean the entire second half. He was announced as questionable to return with the knee injury. Then I don't know if the knee injury was bad enough that he had to sit out, or if the Bucs said, you know what, this one's under control. We don't need to put Dean out there and risk making it worse. So he was downgraded to out for the rest of the game. You had sacks by Yaya Diaby, Logan Hall, Kalijah Kancey, Anthony Nelson, and Chris Braswell. The Bucs defense allowed 39 rushing yards to the Carolina Panthers. Carolina went 2 of 9 on third down. The Buccaneers had the ball for 41 minutes and 11 seconds compared to 18 minutes and 49 seconds by Carolina. It was complete and total dominance. Then you can flip it over to the other side of the ball. There was offense putting up huge numbers. Baker Mayfield had never had a 4,000-yard season in his career before joining Tampa. He's got 4,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. 39 touchdown passes, a career high. He also has 4 games this season with 4 or more passing touchdowns, which is tied with Lamar Jackson for the most in the NFL. He tied Tom Brady for a franchise record 8 games with 3 or more touchdown passes. His 5 touchdown passes against Carolina in this game are a single game career high. Bucky Irving, the first Bucs rookie running back to hit 1,000 yards since Doug Martin in 2012, and the first Bucs running back to hit it, period, since Martin in 2015. Jalen McMillan, 4 straight games with a touchdown, matching the 4th longest streak by a rookie in NFL history. Mike Evans is now 87 yards away from his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard season, which would tie Jerry Rice's all-time record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons and extend his own record of consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start a career. The Bucs as a whole, 3 games of 40 or more points, which is second in the league only to the Detroit Lions. They've had over 500 yards 3 times this season. That's the most in the NFL, and it's one shy of the NFL record set by the Dallas Cowboys in 2020 of 4 games. So if the Bucs go for 500 or more next week against the Saints, they tie the NFL record. Think about this. The Buccaneers have allowed an average of 16.7 points per game since the bye week. The offense is averaging 32.7 points per game. With these kinds of numbers, the Bucs might actually be able to do some damage in the playoffs. I know I was skeptical, and I talked about if they have to face Minnesota, if they have to face, Washington or Philadelphia or Green Bay, they might struggle. They might not get out of the first round. Now, of course, since the bye week, they haven't really faced the caliber of offense that any of those teams that they would face in the postseason possess, but they will be getting back Antoine Winfield Jr. That's a huge boost. And then let's talk about Shaq Barrett, who is back with the team. We haven't been able to talk about it because the Bucs signed him about 30 minutes after our live show on Friday. But once he gets put into the pass rush rotation, he can cause some problems. I had texted with the insiders when the signing was made. I said, don't expect Shaq to play against the Panthers, but I would guess that he is active and plays against the New Orleans Saints, even if it's just for 6 or 8 snaps. It's purely situational, but allow him to get a couple snaps against the Saints and get his legs under him before the postseason begins. Bowles is now going to have the opportunity to put Shaq out there in passing situations along with Yaya Diaby and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, or Diaby and Chris Braswell, or Anthony Nelson. He's going to be able to put them on the field in addition to those guys, not in place of those guys in some situations. That's going to create some really difficult looks for opposing offenses when they know they have to drop back and throw the ball. Instead of having to blitz Antoine Winfield Jr. or Levante David, those guys can stay back in coverage, help an injured and beaten up secondary, help cover the middle of the field, which is still a problem despite how well the defense has been playing, because now your extra blitzer is Shaq freaking Barrett. When you take a look at this Carolina game, this was every bit as much of a complete team victory as the game against the Chargers. And I said at that time that game was the best game that the Buccaneers had played all season. I still believe that. But this game against the Panthers, winning 48-14 in a must-win situation coming off of a gut-wrenching loss to the Dallas Cowboys in prime time, they lived up to it. I give the Chargers game the edge simply because the Chargers defense is still number 1 in the NFL in scoring defense, but that game was on the road, which made it all the more impressive. The defense didn't get a takeaway against the Panthers, but they got a lot of stops. They got a lot of 3 and outs throughout this game. They pressured and sacked Bryce Young on numerous occasions, way more than in the first matchup against Carolina. It was just an absolutely phenomenal job all around. You take a look at kind of cringing a little bit at one of Trey Palmer's punt returns. I believe it was the last one before before halftime when they were pinned back at like the 4-yard line. And you were like, oof, special teams still a little rough. Special teams comes through with a blocked punt, scoop, and score by J.J. Russell. So even special teams was contributing. Sent out a text to the insiders about Todd Bowles' comments coming out of halftime regarding the secondary, and he said we blew some coverage. We had miscommunication. The defensive backs need to get their heads out of their butts. He did not use the word butts, but this team rallied. For what was it again? 43 yards allowed by the Buccaneers defense in the entire second half. That's incredible stuff. That is playoff football. You love to see it. That was a huge boost for this Buccaneers team. Let's jump into the chat real quick because I did not realize that I was already at the 10-minute mark. Benjamin says, how likely is it for Dennis and Winfield to play in the first round of the playoffs? Sebastian Dennis will not play. He is out, period. He will not return, even if the Bucs make it to the Super Bowl. Sebastian Dennis is out. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. plays this coming week against the New Orleans Saints. He will be back on the field sooner than later. We got Chief T-Bird. He says, too bad we crapped the bed last week. You know, my dad texted me almost the exact same thing. His was more along the lines of, now, why couldn't they have done that last week against the stupid frickin' Cowboys? I believe was my dad's comment. But I have my biggest takeaway overall coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, even goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. To me, I'm all about the subscription tracker. There were a few subscriptions that I had that I was paying for twice, or subscriptions that my wife and I both had and didn't realize that we were each paying for them. So we were able to save money there. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland, and of course, you can swing by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day, so make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. A couple of comments that I want to jump in here with because they play perfectly into what I'm about to talk about. We got Ben in the chat. He says, James, do you think Baker makes it onto the all-pro team this year? And then we got Mad Dog. He says Baker is playing at an all-pro level. And then Jimbo Shrump, my dude, Jimbo. He says Baker is playing at an MVP level. Okay, for those of you that follow me on Twitter, I made a little comment after I saw a certain tweet that Baker absolutely should be in the conversation for MVP. And it's an absolute crime that he is not talked about in the same breath as guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Now, before we get too deep into this, I personally believe that Saquon Barkley should actually get the MVP award this year. But since it's a quarterback award now, let's talk about it. The only reason that Baker Mayfield isn't in the MVP conversation is because of the team's record rather than actual performance. Let's go step by step. Baker Mayfield on the season has 4,279 passing yards. Lamar Jackson has 3,995. Josh Allen has 3,549. Baker Mayfield has 39 touchdown passes. Lamar has 39 touchdown passes. Josh Allen has 26. If you want to take it one step further and add in the rushing and, in Josh Allen's case, receiving touchdowns, Baker has 42 total touchdowns. Lamar has 43. Josh Allen has 38. How about completion percentage? Lamar Jackson is sitting at 67.9. Josh Allen is sitting at 63.8. Baker Mayfield is at 71.7. If Baker Mayfield finishes this season with a completion percentage over 70%, in addition to 4,000 yards, and assuming he gets at least one touchdown pass next week and finishes with 40 on the season, he will become just the second quarterback in NFL history to have over 4,000 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, and a completion percentage north of 70%. The only other one to do it, Drew Brees. The biggest difference between these three players is interceptions. Lamar Jackson only has 4, which is absolutely incredible. Josh Allen only has 6. Baker Mayfield has 15. But let's also let's also talk about the fact that Baker had to play for a month without his top 2 receivers and has played 9 out of 16 games this season without Chris Godwin. Yes, the same Chris Godwin that when he went down was leading the NFL in receptions, was top 3 in receiving yards, was top 3 in touchdowns, and was number 1 in yards after catch. Yet, he's managed to surpass last year's marks in yards, touchdowns, and completion percentage with still another game to go. Baker Mayfield is a huge reason that the Buccaneers are where they are this year. When you really talk about MVP, what does that mean? It means which player is the most valuable to their team. Yes, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are incredible players. I love watching them play football, and they play a huge role in the success of the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. But I would be hard-pressed to say that either one has been more valuable to their respective teams this season than Baker Mayfield has been to the Bucs. Go through all the injuries that the Buccaneers have suffered and how much the Bucs have had to overcome with such a bad defense for much of the year. Yes, I just talked about how the defense has stepped up since the bye week, but the Ravens and the Bills are 12th and 13th, respectively, in the NFL in scoring defense. The Bucs, even with this late surge, are still 22nd. So again, I ask, why isn't Baker being talked about in the same conversation as those two players? Of course, I also think that Joe Burrow should probably win MVP if the Bengals are able to make the playoffs. He's certainly going to be in the conversation, but he will not win the award if the Bengals don't make the postseason. But he's been absolutely incredible. I didn't put his stats down because I didn't need to. He's leading the league in passing yards. He's leading the league in touchdown passes. We know the kind of impact that he's had, and he's had to overcome an even worse defense than what Baker Mayfield has dealt with. But that will become the conversation. It will be, is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Josh Allen? Or is it Joe Burrow? Baker will be overlooked and ignored because of why? I mean, Tom Brady lost an MVP in Tampa in 2021 when he had a better statistical season than Aaron Rodgers. When you break it all down statistically, Baker is leading or tied with the 2 MVP frontrunners in most or all passing categories. Is it small market anti-Tampa bias? Is it anti-Baker bias? Is it the fact that the NFL views Lamar and Allen as more marketable and popular superstars, so they get to be in the running, but the quarterback of an NFC South team doesn't because of the weakness of the division? You could also make the case that the AFC East is incredibly weak as well. It just doesn't make any sense how he can be overlooked like this, yet his offensive coordinator is going to get head coaching interviews because of how good he was. But who was it that ran the offense? Cohen isn't getting any head coaching calls if Baker isn't playing to the level that Baker is playing this year. So this was kind of my airing of grievances after I saw Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens talking about a color commentator's comments regarding the Allen versus Lamar MVP debate. They had said that Allen is probably going to get it over Lamar because Lamar already has 2 and Josh Allen has none. And my buddy Kevin said that it should go to the player that actually deserves it, which I agree with. So how can either one of those guys deserve it more than Baker Mayfield when you really start to break it all down. Of course, at the end of the day, I still think Saquon Barkley deserves it more than anyone else. But if you're going to have the debate between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and you're going to blow off the accomplishments of Baker Mayfield this year, given all of the problems that the Buccaneers have had to deal with from an injury standpoint, from the key players that they have lost and the key players that Baker Mayfield himself has lost this season, it's simply ridiculous. So instead of doing my biggest takeaways on offense and defense, because this game was so lopsided, I was like, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity to point out just how impressive Baker Mayfield has truly been this season. Going to jump into the comments again real quick before we move on. We got Paul, a.k.a. OG Baker Bro, says Baker needs to have 2 or 3 more wins. Then he would be in the MVP conversation. Wins aren't a quarterback stat, and I'm not going to look at that. Like, I realize that the overall record plays into it. I mentioned that Burrow won't get the MVP if the Bengals don't make the playoffs. But at the same time, without Mike, without Chris, took the Chiefs to overtime, I can't even remember the schedule off the top of my head at this point in time, but every one of those games came down to the wire without his 2 best players, and he was making plays and getting it done. Demon Hunter says, if we win the South, why not Baker for MVP? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, DH. He deserves to be, at the very least, in the conversation. I saw somebody earlier, and I'm sorry, you guys have dropped a lot of comments. I appreciate all of you. But I saw someone earlier say Bucky Irving should win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I agree. He should 100% be in that conversation, but he's not, because he's not a quarterback. It's going to go to either Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix. Probably Jaden Daniels, but Bo Nix has been fantastic down the stretch. So, yeah, Bucky Irving has been one of the best running backs in the NFL. Not just the best rookie running back, but he has been one of the best running backs in the NFL this season, and he's not mentioned one time. It's Jaden versus Nix. Just like the MVP race is Lamar versus Josh. Make it make sense. I'm going to hand out game balls for, the first time in a couple of weeks, and I'm excited to do so. Start dropping your game balls in the chat, because that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a live post-game reaction episode of Locked On Bucs following the Buccaneers' 48-14 victory over the Carolina Panthers. And let me also take a moment before we hand out game balls. I see you guys starting to drop those in the chat. What a difference between this game and the game in Carolina. This was Todd Bowles saying last time was a fluke. Dave, kudos to you. Hat tip. Bryce Young is going to be a problem for the next couple of years in the NFC South. I don't know what Dave has done there to really just turn around what Bryce Young was as a quarterback, but he looks really, really good. But this was a statement win. This was a smack in the mouth from the Buccaneers to their former offensive coordinator saying, no. You guys are getting better, but you're still not on level with us. So you guys know how this works. 2 game balls to each side of the football. And the first one is our Locked On Bucs golden game ball. Who else but Baker Mayfield? 27 for 32 for 359 yards and 5 touchdowns. The dude had as many touchdowns as he did incomplete passes. He was completely dialed in. No dumb throws. No bad decisions. He got Mike a big chunk of the yards that he needs to make that 1,000-yard plateau attainable next week. I told you guys Mike needed 91 per game for the rest of the season. He got 97. So he was ahead of the pace. No Marshawn Lattimore in New Orleans anymore. Mike is going to get it, and Baker is going to make sure that Mike gets it. Career high in yards, touchdowns, completion percentage on the season with another game to go. He is looking to be just the second quarterback in franchise history to have 40 touchdown passes in a season. Tom Brady did it twice. He had 43 in 2021. He had 40 in 2022. Another performance like we just had from Baker Mayfield, he breaks Tom Brady's single season touchdown record for, in franchise history. What a statement that would be. Game ball number 2, my top defensive player. This was tough. It was tough to pick these defensive guys today, but I'm going with Zion McCollum. He had really, really bad coverage in the beginning of the game on a Thielen pass that led to an explosive play on the Panthers touchdown drive. I think it was a 31-yard gain. And I mean, first and foremost, what a pass by Bryce Young. Again, credit where credit is due. That he dropped that thing into a bucket from 30 yards away. If McCollum gets his head turned around, he might have been in line to get an interception. Instead, he was not playing the way he should, didn't get his head turned around, wasn't able to stop the pass. It was bad, and it ended up leading to a Panthers touchdown. But after that, a team-high 6 tackles, a key pass breakup on third down against Xavier Legette to stop a Panthers drive. I loved the way that McCollum bounced back after that first initial test of his failed. So, good job from Zion McCollum on Sunday. Game ball number 3, my other offensive game ball, Bucky Irving, guys. I mean, come on. We already talked about the 1,000-yard stuff. He's the first Buck since 2015 to do it, first rookie Buck since 2012, finished with 113 yards on 20 carries. That's good for 5.7 yards per carry. He had 4 receptions for 77 yards. That's a career high in receiving yards, and he was 1 foot shy of having a 43-yard catch and run for a touchdown, which, would have gotten me 40-yard plus touchdown bonus points in my fantasy league, but who cares about that? Honestly, Bucky Irving has been the most important offensive player on the team outside of Baker Mayfield this entire season. All due respect to Mike, Chris in the early part, it's been Bucky. He gets everything going, and he just continues to impress with his ability to slip tackles and pick up chunks of yards. You're talking about Bucky Irving, and of course, you had the addition of Graham Barton, you had the addition of Ben Bredesen. That can't go overlooked. But you have Bucky Irving as the key part of a rushing attack that goes from the worst in the NFL to top 3. He's been absolutely amazing. Final game ball, and you know what? This one is kind of my way of forcing myself to eat crow, because I don't know if there's somebody who has called out this player more than I have, and it's Logan Hall. He had a huge 4th down sack to get the turnover on downs at midfield in the second half. He finished with 3 tackles in the game. 2 of them were tackles for loss. He's finally starting to make an impact again after a hot start and then a disappearing act for like 3 months. But his impact is something that the Bucs have been looking for, that they have sorely needed on the defensive side. And, from somebody other than Vita Vea or Kalijah Kancey, they needed somebody else to step up and really start making some noise. He has had some strong games over the last couple of weeks. Need him to keep building on that. He has to continue to raise his level of play each and every week so that he is an impact player in the postseason. Going to jump in here and see who you guys are giving the game balls out to. We got Joe that says the Duck gets a game ball. Absolutely. I can't remember who it was. Somebody on Twitter said that Bucky's spirit animal wanted a front row seat to the game. We got Jordan in the chat. He says game ball to Payne Durham, Baker Mayfield, JJ Russell, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and Bucky Irving. I had Joe Tryon-Shoyinka as my second defensive game ball, and I ended up pivoting, and I made it Logan Hall, but JTS got an honorable mention from me. Lakita says on defense, Kalijah Kancey and Logan Hall. We've got, D. Ritz says Mike is going to have 1,000 yards before halftime next week. I love that. Who else are we giving game balls out to? We got destined for greatness, my buddy. Says on offense, Baker and Bucky. Baker had as many touchdowns today as Watson did for the Browns all season. That might be my favorite stat of all time. Destined, if you haven't already tweeted that, please do so. I'll retweet you from my account and the Locked On Bucs account. And then he also says special teams and defense goes to the Duck. We got Allie, 2 game balls, one for Bucky, one for Baker. I agree 100%. We got Joe calling him Pro Bowl Bucky. We've got Jimbo Shrump saying he drops a duck emoji and a football emoji. Let's see. Benjamin says you should also lament talking about Durham. He showed up today. He absolutely did, but so did Devin Culp. How much fun was that? At halftime, Devin Culp was the Buccaneers' leading receiver with, I think he had 52 yards at halftime. Loved to see that. I know a lot of the folks that were in the live chat on Friday's live show were talking about Devin Culp. And see, and we'll finish with this. Joe says, James, thanks for helping us get through the year. Joe, I appreciate you so much, and I'm happy to be here with you guys each and every day. I have so much fun doing this, and honestly, I can't wait to kick off 2025 with all of you guys. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on and on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure that you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, and become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding Victory Monday. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.